Welcome back to Finance First Steps. I am Krishna. Your coworker Naomi mentions, almost as a throwaway comment while you're both waiting for the coffee machine, that she just bumped her retirement contribution up and spent the entire weekend quietly stressed about the smaller paycheck. You nod along, sympathetic, and then realize a beat too late that you genuinely don't know what percentage goes into yours anymore. You can't recall the number without checking. You open the app right there at your desk, half expecting a small jolt of concern. Instead, you feel something closer to mild surprise, the way you'd feel finding cash in an old jacket pocket. 11%. You set that number 8 months ago and haven't thought about it once since, not because you were avoiding it, but because it simply stopped requiring your attention. That's the moment it actually lands. Not a big balance, not a dramatic realization, just this. Standing at your desk with a lukewarm coffee, mildly startled that something you built months ago has been quietly running this entire time, completely without you. Rewind 8 months. It's a Sunday evening, the kind where you're half watching something on your laptop and half avoiding the thought that's been sitting in the back of your mind for weeks. You should probably actually deal with your finances instead of vaguely intending to. You open your banking app, not with any real plan, just restlessness. You look at your checking account, $4,190. It's payday week, so the number looks healthier than usual, which is exactly the kind of moment where good intentions usually show up and then quietly disappear by Thursday. You almost close the laptop. You tell yourself you'll do this properly next weekend, when you have more time to research the right percentage, the right account, the right approach. Then you catch yourself doing the thing you always do, turning a 5-minute decision into a research project specifically so you can avoid making it at all. So instead, you do something almost embarrassingly simple. You set up one automatic transfer. A fixed percentage of your paycheck moved into a separate account the same day your salary lands before you ever see it sitting in your main balance. You don't calculate the perfect number. You pick something that won't hurt too much, click confirm, and close the laptop.
It takes 11 minutes. You don't tell anyone. There's nothing to tell yet. 3 months later, your car starts making a sound it's never made before, a faint metallic clicking every time you turn the wheel. You already know how this usually goes. Something breaks, the number is bigger than expected, and you spend the next couple of months quietly absorbing it, one uncomfortable card payment at a time. The mechanic, a soft-spoken guy named Derek, who's worked on your car for years, pulls a worn part out from under the hood and holds it up like evidence. Powered, he says, parts and labor comes to $340. You brace for the familiar tightening in your chest, the beginning of the math you've done too many times before. Except this time, it doesn't arrive. You open your banking app right there in the waiting room, and there it is, sitting quietly in the account you set up that Sunday evening, $1,240. You transfer $340 out, pay Derek, and drive home without a single new number attached to your month. That's the whole moment. No scramble, no card, no slow bleed over the following weeks, just money moving from one place to another exactly the way it was supposed to. It didn't feel significant at the time you built it. The account sat at zero for the first few weeks, just a name on a screen you'd occasionally glance at. It grew the same quiet way every payday since, without you doing anything beyond the original 11 minutes. You check your checking account balance that night out of habit, $2,760.40, the same number it's been sitting at for weeks, untouched by an emergency that for the first time in longer than you can remember, didn't cost you anything you'd still be feeling next month. A few weeks after the car repair, you're at dinner with your sister, Erin, who's telling you about a course she just paid for, something about manifesting financial abundance, $40 a month, cancel anytime. She asks if you've ever tried visualization for money goals. You say no, mostly because you're not sure what you'd even visualize anymore. The truth, which you don't say out loud, is that you stopped needing a mental picture of the future once the transfer started doing the picturing for you. You used to lie awake some nights running rough math about retirement, about emergencies, about whether you were behind where you should be. You don't do that anymore, not because you solved anything dramatically, but because the math quietly keeps itself now, 2 weeks at a time, without requiring you to hold it in your head.
Erin asks how your savings are going, half out of curiosity, half checking whether you're doing better than her. You tell her honestly that you don't really know off the top of your head, which makes her laugh, assuming you're joking. You're not. You genuinely don't check as often as you used to, because there's less to manage and less to worry about managing. She talks about her course a little more. You don't say anything discouraging. You just think quietly that the difference between her $40 subscription and your 11 minutes 8 months ago is that hers requires her to keep believing in something every single day, and yours simply keeps working, whether she believes in it or not. A message comes through on a Thursday night from your friend Lauren, who's getting married in the spring. She's found a bachelorette weekend, a cabin by a lake, split 6 ways. The breakdown follows a few messages later.
transport, the house, dinners, one afternoon renting kayaks. Total at the bottom, $610. You read it twice, not because the number shocks you, but because you're already doing a different calculation, one that happens automatically now that didn't used to. You have $610. That was never really the question. The question is what $610 actually does from here, and which version of that answer you can live with without a flicker of regret later. You set your phone down, make tea, and come back to it. The pressure isn't coming from Lauren. It's more ambient than that, the quiet assumption that of course you're going. The same unspoken idea that having money in your account means it's meant to be spent the moment something appears that wants it. You used to operate that way without noticing. Money arrived, spending quietly expanded to meet it, the way water finds the shape of whatever it's poured into. What's different now is a small pause that didn't used to exist. A beat where you ask something close to, does this move me toward what I actually want? Or does it just feel good for one weekend and quietly cost me for the next 3 months? For the cabin, the answer doesn't come clean. You tell Lauren separately that you're thrilled for her and you're going to sit this one out. She responds warmly, the group chat moves on, and nobody mentions it again by the following week.
You move the $610 you would have spent into the account that's been quietly growing since that Sunday evening. No fireworks, no announcement. Just a slightly larger number sitting where it already was. Late autumn, a company-wide email announces year-end bonuses. Yours comes out to $1,850, deposited on a Friday alongside your regular paycheck. You notice the total looks unusually large before you've even opened the breakdown, and for about 10 seconds you let yourself imagine the version of the week where that number turns into something new. A weekend trip, a piece of furniture you've been eyeing, a small, reckless celebration of a good year. Your friend Owen, who mentioned months ago that he'd financed a kayak over 18 payments, texts the group chat a photo of a new watch he bought with his own bonus. Same day it landed, still in the box. Nice, you type back, and mean it. You don't mention that yours went somewhere else entirely. Not because you're hiding it, just because there's nothing dramatic to report. By the time you check your account that evening, the $1,850 has already split itself the same way everything else does now. A portion into the account that once sat at zero and now quietly covers whatever breaks, a portion into the one that's been compounding since that first Sunday, a small amount left in checking, enough for something nice this weekend, decided on purpose rather than by default. This is the part that surprises you most, looking back. You always assumed a windfall would be the moment discipline finally broke, the exception that proved the rule. Instead, it just became one more input the system already knew what to do with, absorbed the same quiet way the last 4 paychecks were, without a single new decision required. 6 weeks later, an email lands in your inbox, a raise, effective the 1st of next month, a little over 3%. You do the math on your lunch break, it comes out to roughly $95 more landing in your account every 2 weeks. Your coworker Marcus gets a similar email, you find out, because he mentions it at lunch, already decided. He's upgrading his apartment. 1 more bedroom, a better view, closer to downtown. You nod. You don't say what you're thinking, which is that you did that exact calculation yourself once, a long time ago, on something else entirely, and you remember precisely how a nicer version of your life quietly becomes the new minimum, leaving you no further ahead than before, just with better furniture. You don't upgrade anything. Instead, you open your settings that evening and adjust the automatic transfer, not dramatically, just enough that the raise moves the same direction the rest of your paycheck already does, into the accounts that don't need your attention to keep growing. It takes 4 minutes. Nobody notices. Marcus talks about the new apartment for the rest of the week. You listen, genuinely happy for him, and go back to your evening exactly the way it was before the email arrived. A stretch of bad headlines rolls through in early spring, the kind that make the news apps light up with red arrows and words like correction and volatility. Marcus mentions it at lunch again, visibly rattled this time, says he checked his portfolio 4 times yesterday alone and moved some of it into cash just to stop the feeling of watching it slide. You realize, somewhat sheepishly, that you hadn't opened your own account once that week, not out of discipline exactly, more because your quarterly reminder to check in isn't due for another 6 weeks, and nothing about your day-to-day required you to look sooner. You open it that evening out of curiosity more than concern. The number is lower than it was a month ago, noticeably so, and for a moment you feel the same flicker of unease Marcus described. Then you remember what the automatic transfer has been doing this entire time, buying the same fixed amount every 2 weeks regardless of whether prices are up or down, which means the drop actually means more shares landed in your account this cycle than the one before it, without you ever making a single decision about timing.
Marcus ends up back in a few weeks later, after the headlines calm down, buying in again at prices higher than where he sold. He doesn't bring it up again. You don't ask. You just quietly note that the thing that felt like protection in the moment, checking constantly, reacting fast, cost him more than doing nothing ever could have. Which brings you back to that coffee machine and Naomi's offhand comment, and the moment you realized you couldn't recall your own contribution percentage without checking. You go back to your desk and, out of curiosity now rather than concern, open the account you rarely open at all, the one that's been quietly compounding since that first Sunday evening 8 months ago. You didn't expect much. You've put in a modest amount every 2 weeks, nothing dramatic, the kind of contribution that never once changed how your weekends looked. But the number in front of you is larger than the sum of what you've actually put in, because money that's been sitting there for months doesn't just wait patiently, it grows on top of itself, quietly, indifferent to whether you are watching.
You think back to that first evening, the almost decision to research it properly next weekend instead, the version of you that nearly talked yourself out of 11 minutes of mild effort. That version of you would not recognize this feeling. Standing here now, faintly startled by a number that built itself without a single follow-up decision required. Naomi's still talking about her weekend of budgeting anxiety when you walk back to your desk. You don't mention any of this. There's nothing dramatic to report. Just a number that quietly did what it was built to do, for 8 months, entirely without your permission being required more than once. That evening, you open your banking app before bed, mostly from habit now rather than worry. Checking. $2,760.40, exactly where it's supposed to sit. The same number it's been for weeks, doing nothing dramatic, asking nothing of you, simply running in the background of a life you're mostly just living now, instead of constantly managing. You close the app. You don't think about it again until the next time someone else's comment makes you check, by accident, and finds you mildly surprised all over again by something you built once on an ordinary Sunday evening, and then were free to forget. If this made you wonder what the exact opposite of this looks like, we told that story too, about the apps quietly building debt the same painless way this quietly built savings. That's worth watching next.